Hello, I'm Karen, and this is the reading of Chapter 10 of Greenlight Medical, Anatomy of Kindness by uninjured on AO3. Chapter 10, Entrance Exams. He wasn't trying to repress his feelings. He wasn't. It was just the entrance exams of his dream school that he had hoped for ever since he was a child. But it wasn't that at all. He had work to do. A lot of work, and that was it. Izuku focused on the protocol of Blank's first two patrols, given to him by Reyes and Dorigas in front of him, smoothing out the pages, pointedly ignoring the voice in the back of his head screaming, "What if?" There was no what if scenario here. Izuku skipped to the next page and read through the neat paragraphs. With how his life went, there had been no way and no hope for him ever to set foot on UA grounds or anything other than their festival. That still didn't make the reality any less saddening. Sure, he was satisfied with where he stood in life. He was happy that he could help other people in some way, but his childhood dreams really do cut and sting when they really shatter, don't they? For some reason, until now, there's always a little part of his mind that kept thinking he still had a chance, that the entrance exams was far in the future and a possible path. Him not even applying buried that part deep, right beside where the grief for his mother lay. But that was irrelevant. What use was it to dwell on what could have been and what is impossible? Better to work in the here and now. He would say he was good at moving on. A good therapist would say the opposite. Izuku skimmed over the last printed out paper. He already got the gist of it anyway. Blank was good on his own, took criminals down with efficiency, didn't shy away from villains using their quirks. When going into action first, he usually implemented the element of surprise with the help of his quirk, and he was aware when he had lost it. For his first patrol with Reyes, the woman also written down him as proficient with first aid, as he had immediately checked the depth of her wound and assessed how urgent healing was. He didn't shy away from taking the lead when it mattered. He could also work in a team, had shown in patrol 2 days later with Dorigas, when they answered a crisis signal of another vigilante, outnumbered by gang members. While having no problem calling the shots, Blank also had a feeling for when to fall in line for orders and operated as support around his team to assure victory. Where he lacked in long distance, he made up by using a lasso-like construct to whip his opponents up and disorient them when spinning them out of it again as he got in range for close combat. Blank seemingly also was well-trained in martial arts, utilizing them without problem and switching between different styles seamlessly. Overall, a well-balanced vigilante. The only thing that nagged Izuku was the tell of his quirk, or a side effect of it. He wasn't too sure. Blank's quirk seemed to always be active, if the 2 times Izuku had seen him were any indication. During the both visits Blank made to the clinic, he observed that his steps were just silent all the time. Whenever the vigilante moved, there's almost no sound at all. The first time Blank walked into the clinic's treating room, Izuku nearly shuddered, because all in all, it was like staring at a ghost. It deeply unsettled him, seeing someone move, their head doing none of that bopping thing, and their steps being inaudible. Izuku would have believed it if he said the man was actually just floating. But apparently, the quirk could flare up, or flare down. The 2 vigilantes Blank had been paired with for the first patrols both reported that when he moved faster, stepping in to take over an opponent, his hair would temporarily float upwards and his steps were clearly audible. So maybe when he moved across space quickly, his quirk recognized that and removed the lightness from his legs. Yeah, that would make sense. And then it would get distributed around his upper body, allowing him to run faster without the added weight. But theories about his quirk aside, something had to be done about the floating hair. Blank seemingly always wore his hair open, not just during checkups, but also during patrol. stay with him here, but Izuku was of the strong conviction that the guy didn't have a quirk for keeping his hair out of his eyes. Something had to be done about that. Sure, an opponent could grab you by your hair more easily if it was in, let's say, a ponytail. But also, Blank's hair was short enough that an opponent managed to snag the ponytail, he would have to be right behind Blank, so he would be screwed either way. And with the hair floating, it could distract others or get in their line of sight. Izuku made a mental note to address that issue the next time he saw the man. With that in mind, he glanced at the whiteboard standing in the corner of his mother's study, surface occupied by plans for up-and-coming raids on a small base of a trafficking ring with the network. It would be risky to add Blank to the mix of vigilantes going on that mission. He was new and had only met 2 others of the network, but he would be excellent. He seemed like the type of vigilante you'd put onto a raid and not regret it. It wasn't that worth the risk. They had 4 teams: Roof, Floor, Outlook, and Transport. Roof and Floor were equipped with 1 person to scope out the space before entering. 1 to be the main fighter, 1 on support. Team Outlook consisted of 2 people watching out for guards coming in. Team Transport would be 2 people, 1 for transporting the vigilantes to the roof, and 1 for navigating the trafficking victims safely to a police station and making sure they are received there. Blank would be good to have on fighting or support position for either the roof team or the floor team. Izuku gnawed at his lip, looking over the board with pen pictures, documents, and arrows pointing back and forth. No. The raid was in a week. All vigilantes on board were already briefed and pulled from patrol to keep them from injury. Blank still had patrols scheduled and had to keep them up to get used to working with the network. Sure, Blank seemed like he wouldn't be overwhelmed by seeing a trafficking location with how he managed seeing some other crimes during his patrols, but people could be surprising. There will be a time when Blank will be a part of a mission, but that probably was neither here nor now, no matter how good of an addition he would be. Well, he will keep it in mind, in case something goes wrong. All other vigilantes would rather focus on patrol, didn't want to take the risk of a raid, or recovering from injuries, or, in 2 cases, were probably too young to see something like that. Screw that. Ghost and Cumulus definitely were. He recently heard Ghost chatting to the other about the entrance exams while they were leaving. Izuku had to do his best to pretend not to hear it. The irony of Izuku saying that they were too young for something like that was not lost to him, as his work would also be frowned upon at his age, that it was too hard or traumatizing. However, he knew how to set his age aside, think rationally without emotions at play when needed. He knew how to distance his heart from himself, and only keep thinking logically and move his hands on protocol. Izuku knew how to carry the responsibility of lives. He saved 1 at least every 2 months without fail. Ghost and Cumulus were too young and too innocent to carry such a heavy burden. If anything happened, they shouldn't have to weather the guilt of having failed. Besides, they were only recently started out, so their inexperience would put them at a disadvantage. Izuku had never lost one of his vigilantes, and didn't plan to. So they were not even going to be informed of the date, even less the time. Izuku nodded at the board, so no changes after all. What to do now? He checked his phone. He had created a specific app not too long ago, which sent him notifications whenever the microphone installed near picked up a sound. For example, a knock. He was sure his phone hadn't been switched to silent, but one could never be too sure. But alas, no new notifications. Izuku sighed, pushed off his desk, and spun around in his mother's chair. His part of work for the cafe was already finished. His last patient left an hour ago, and now he finished reviewing Blank's patrol debriefs. No new patients had come in. He spared a glance back towards the work desk and surveyed the notes scattered in one corner. His part of the work for the cafe was already finished. His last patient left an hour ago, and now he finished reviewing Blank's patrol debriefs. No new patients had come in. He spared a glance back towards the work desk and surveyed the notes scattered in one corner. His eyes brightened. Right! His newest experiment was nearly concluded and was waiting for him back in his lab, the room his mother used to store her books and his father's memorabilia in, converted into a makeshift, homey laboratory. Quite fitting with the rest of the clinic. But the experiment... Izuku scrambled off the chair, nearly toppling over, but catching himself with the help of a shelf. Excitement bubbled through his veins at the thought of his experiment being successful. Sure, it would only really help one single person, maybe two, but it would be a breakthrough. Even with no one else here to witness it with him, maybe his mother would have been proud if she could have watched him. That thought left a bad taste in his mouth, squishing his excitement into an odd shape. Izuku took a lungful of air, allowing the weird feeling to dispel. It didn't. But the excitement still remained, however it might feel now, so he clung to that. He pushed open the door to a small lab and headed down for the refrigerator after putting on the mandatory gloves. The lock on it gave way, and the latch with the key he had hung on a necklace inserted, and the number of locks fell away with the correct passcode. Izuku pulled open the latches, and the door of the refrigerator slowly swung open. One of the middle shelves had a test tube rack. Inside it, 3 tall vials of the familiar light green liquid. His patients had gotten to calling his medicine Greenlight in honor of the clinic's name, its obvious color and referencing of how it was used to save the lives and heal them. Izuku grinned. Now let's test if the new batch could save lives faster. He took out the rack carefully, being mindful of the shelf below, eyeing the filled tubes with what he called BY0 and MI03.5, doing his best not to accidentally jostle them. They were still explosion marks on one of the fridge's side from when the first time that happened. What he held in his hands was an alternative version of BY09, MI04. The original version was the thing that the entire clinic was founded on, and what kept it running. It's what he lies and tells his patients about being his quirk. Well, it was all just chemistry. Partially, it was what he injected into their veins to heal them. Izuku set the rack down on the table besides an accumulation of tools, a cold box he had set beforehand, and a specialized microscope. The idea behind this version was simple. All Greenlight versions available in the clinic worked better for different types of people depending on their quirk. There was BY09 MI0401 that worked best for non-rejective mutant types, -02 for emitter, -03 for mutant types, and so on. All versions beside -03 worked perfectly well on quirkless people. But what if he could create one specifically for the quirkless, something that healed them faster than average Greenlight injection for another? The main thing with Greenlight was that there was a very fine line between his quirk rejection and healing factor. He had figured that out through various experiments before and while he ran the clinic. But quirkless, like himself, they did not have a quirk that the medicine could reject. So would it be possible to allow for a high-end quirk rejection in order to get an enhanced healing factor? He calmed his hands and mind down, going through a quick breathing exercise. Right now, Midori Izuku had no business having quaking hands and messing up the procedure. Right now, being a doctor was his priority. He opened the cooler box, taking a vial of blood he had drawn from himself. Uncorking it, he tested quickly before taking a drop of it and carefully depositing it on a microscope slide and creating a clean blood smear. The Izuku part of him cheered that he had learned to do that so well in such a short time. He squashed the sentiment down quickly with the argument that no less is expected of him at the clinic. Now came the real test. If this worked, then one of his quirkless vigilante could recover faster. Then the risk of them being out in action would be lowered. His one quirkless vigilante, Cumulus, would not need to call in sick to school and lie to their parents about staying at a friend's house while they spent the night at the clinic, if them being a minor was really true. He took a breath, holding it in. Izuku watched through the microscope as the drug he created fused with the blood, and then disappointment set in, because the new med showed all signs of the healing factor moving thrice as fast and settling in, but then it changed. The quirk rejection turned on Greenlight, recognizing itself as quirk, and taking effect, and Izuku watched with horror as the blood curdled in on itself, now the failed version of Greenlight sitting in between the quickly drying blood and lost with an odd transparent sheen. Izuku sighs and leans away from the microscope, flexing his hands underneath the gloves. Another failed experiment, another failure. He was disappointed with himself. He was so sure that this would be the right combination. He quickly went through the process of creating Greenlight in his mind. Where could he have failed? He comes to multiple conclusions and realizes, all but one he can't even try to fix. Physically, he does not have access to the solutions. Sure, his brain already had multiple theories running on what could be used alternatively in Step 2, or when to decrease the temperature when freezing. But there was no way for him to get the material he needed, and the freezer that he would need. That would require an actual laboratory. Izuku sighed and took the slide off from the microscope, cringing at the crusted blood clinging to the thin sheet of glass. He would need to dispose of that, along with the 3 vials he had made of this version. Luckily, he had a contact for getting rid of things he didn't want anyone else getting their hands on. But still, failure was disappointing. Izuku left the experiment as it was on the table, only storing away the microscope and the blood vials before making his way out again. He stopped in the doorway and glanced toward the bookshelf standing at his left. If only he could recreate the medicine all artificially, then it would be easier to predict. And it was all there, in one of the notebooks, standing there on the shelf, just waiting. For what exactly? He did not have access to a proper lab, and he won't anytime soon, or ever really. And he could never submit it to another doctor before trying it out himself and knowing all the steps were sure and being confident it worked. Besides, if so many people at the hospital had access to it, what if his idea was taken from him and recreated wrong, or used in bad things? How will he have helped then? He would have been just as useless as before, if not worse. If villains or criminals got in their hand on it, then he would be helping them by extension. Would that really be worth trying to submit a draft? Trying being the key word there. Izuku sighed. He would probably be arrested for this on the spot for having info of this in the first place. After all is said and done, thank you for listening. Another failure. Failure. That's a weird word. Failure. Why do I...